Okay, so we just started streaming on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitch. And participants will start logging in here. I don't see anybody logged in yet. Okay, I see a few early bird people here, so just wanted to welcome you to today's program. We will get started at 10 a.m. So we have about 7 minutes until the start of the program. In the meantime, you'll see some slides on your screen, sort of letting you know about our thanking our sponsors, letting you know about other programs coming up. Wanted to remind you that this is part 3 of a 4-part series, so we will be having a final part next Tuesday, Gingerbread Builder. And part of that program will involve you as a participant. If you'd like to build your own gingerbread house, we want to encourage you to be inspired by any piece of architecture, historic or otherwise, that you'd like to build in gingerbread, and we will have a contest. So you go to our website for the registration page for this program. There's a form for you to upload your gingerbread image, and we will be selecting a winner next Tuesday. So between now and next Monday, you can upload your images of your gingerbread house, and we look forward to seeing your entries. We have 10 participants logged in right now. If you have any questions for today's program, we encourage you to use the Q&A box. The Q&A box is at the bottom of your screen. You can click that, and there's an option if you see a question that you'd like to be answered by our speakers, you can upvote a question. We will be finishing promptly at 11 a.m. today Pacific, so we encourage people to use that Q&A box early so that we can get to all the questions that we have for the day. We have 5 minutes until the start of the program. Wanted to welcome you to today's program entitled Let's Hit the Slopes. We have 3 speakers today who will each be speaking for 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll close with the Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions for our panelists, you can start thinking of those. You can find more about the entire series by visiting our website at californiapreservation.org. We also have a YouTube channel and Facebook stream, so feel free to visit those links and subscribe to us there. We have a quick 1-hour program today, so please do ask those questions early. We'll start here in about 4 minutes. Today, we also have people visiting us from Facebook and YouTube. And if you have questions from those streaming platforms, I'll be monitoring the comment box on those. So feel free to ask any questions using those platforms. If you have any issues with Zoom, for those of you who are logged in on Zoom, you can always jump over to our Facebook page or our YouTube page. Our YouTube page is youtube.com/calpreservation. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/capreservation. So you could use either one of those links to visit the video as well, the live stream. The recording will be available after the conclusion of today's program, and it's accessible for free at either of those platforms. You can also find it at LinkedIn. We have 21 participants logged in. Wanted to welcome everybody. As we're getting started here, we wanted to hear from you and where you're coming from. Sometimes we have people from all over the country and even internationally, so we like hearing where you're coming from and where you're logging in from. We will have a lot of time today for questions, so we encourage you to use that Q&A box to ask those questions. Start here in about 2 minutes. Yeah, I was wondering why your share screen stopped there. Welcome back to the webinar. So we have a lot of people here today. I think we have about 300 people signed up for today's program. So we like to, in the beginning of these programs, let you know how you can ask those questions. The more questions we get, the quicker we try to move, and we want you to ask those questions early. So please use the Q&A box to ask them. If you'd like to ask your question of our speakers in person, you can click the raise hand symbol, and we'll take a look at your username and check with you, and then we'll activate your microphone and camera to ask that question. We're now also live on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitch. So if you're visiting us from there, you can always ask your questions using those platforms. We look forward to the 3 presentations today. We have 3 speakers, Amy, Werner, and Sarah. And the order of presentations, we'll start with Sarah, then we'll have Amy, and then we'll close with Werner. Each of our speakers will be introducing themselves. And I think that's about all I wanted to go over. So please.
and the weather vane were drawn from the page in the Campfire Girl Handbook that depicts the year in moons. These were adapted Native American symbols. Marjorie Hoffman Smith, the assistant administrator for the Federal Art Project in Oregon, was retained as interior decorator. Smith pulled the interior together and created an overall whole using arts and crafts and Art Deco details in interior finishing. Recycling was used when possible. For example, worn CCC uniforms were torn apart and hooked into rugs. Smith developed 28 designs for 61 guest rooms based on Native flowers, and fauna. The rooms illustrated here depict the Solomon Seal flora design and the forest and stream theme. The textiles were created by the Women's and Professional Project under the WPA in the Elks Temple in Portland, where women sewed applique draperies for main lobby and guest room areas, cooked 119 rugs for floors in lobbies and the guest rooms, and wove 912 yards of fabric for draperies in the Cascade dining room and upholstery throughout. Only one member of a family could be employed on the WPA at a time, so most of the women who worked on the project were widowed or divorced, and the average age was 56. Darrell Austin painted 5 oil paintings illustrating mountain activities, but of the 5, only 2 hung originally at the lodge until the remaining 3 were loaned to the lodge more recently. This painting on the left is the musicians. The theme of mountain activities was also used by Doug Lynch in creating carved and painted linoleum panels, which are in the original ski grill, now the Barlow Room. On the right is the last painting that was commissioned for Timberline under the Federal Art Project, The Mountain. It's by Charles Haney. Smith had taken Haney to Timberline on July 20th of 1937 to discuss and perhaps to allow him to draw some sketches for this commissioned oil. It was finished in September 1937, and it hung in the lodge in a temporary white frame that Haney had made for it. I believe the frame is the original frame still. The Mountain currently hangs in the main lobby, and it's one of the 2 largest paintings that Haney ever did. C.S. Price painted the Huckleberry Pickers up the top on the left and Pack Train at the bottom on the left for the end wall in the Cascade dining room. These are also 2 of the largest and perhaps the most significant of paintings by C.S. Price. He was able to paint these large works because materials were provided to him through the Federal Art Project. The murals were rejected for hanging in that location originally, and were replaced by the 2 murals you can see at the right in very different style by Howard Sewell, symbolizing lodge builders wood and symbolizing lodge builders metal. The Sewell paintings were removed for restoration in the 1970s and now hang on the mezzanine, and the Price murals hang at the lodge in the C.S. Price wing. President Franklin D. Roosevelt came to Oregon to dedicate Bonneville Dam, but agreed to motor around Mount Hood to dedicate Timberline Lodge on September 28, 1937. Griffith orchestrated the event with Oregon politicians and involved the Federal Theater and Music projects in the entertainment. The lodge was not open, but rooms were assigned to the Roosevelts, who did not stay overnight. The elevator was in service so that FDR, could deliver the dedication from the terrace. Roosevelt dedicated the lodge to the WPA workers who built it. The group ate lunch inside the lodge in the main lobby, and after lunch, they looked around briefly and left for the train station in Portland, passing a CCC camp on the way down the mountain at Zigzag. The lodge was not completed until February of 1938, another 4 months. By that time, the entire cost of the lodge had amounted to about $1 million. It opened in February 1938 in a snowstorm. It had been designed, built, and furnished in just over 2 years. The Magic Mile chairlift was built the next year on the east side of the lodge. Its terminus was at Silcock's Hut, named after Ferdinand Silcox, chief of the Forest Service, who was instrumental in supporting both construction of the lodge in 1935 and the chairlift before he died. Prince Olaf and Princess Martha of Norway dedicated the lift in May 1939 while it was under construction by tightening a steel bolt with an oversized silver-plated wrench. Timberline Lodge Inc. operated the lodge until 1942 when it was closed for the duration of the World War II. It reopened in 1945. A bar was added on the mezzanine in 1950. Gambling was introduced. The operator who acquired the permit in 1954 did not provide needed maintenance or pay bills. Sandy Electric Co-op turned off the electricity on February 18th, 1955, and everyone left the lodge in darkness. The Forest Service revoked the permittee's permit, and the future looked bleak. In April 1955, Richard L. Constam became Timberline area operator. He reopened the lodge that summer and devoted his life to improving the lodge and the ski area. RLK died in 2006, but his family still operates the lodge under the RLK and Company and the ski area. In 2005, Hank Pander painted this portrait of Richard Constam holding the lodge in his hand, signifying RLK's devotion to the lodge. Locally, Richard Constam is known as the man who saved Timberline Lodge, and he truly was. In 1975, RLK was inspired by a Seattle visitor's suggestion to form a support group. He convinced his friend Jack Mills to form the nonprofit Friends of Timberline to raise funds for art and furnishing restoration. The picture on the right shows one of Friends' most visible projects, funding a new winter entrance to replace the Quonset hut that had been used since the 1950s to protect the lodge entry from winter snows accumulating in front of it. The new winter entrance was completed in 2009. Two other highly visible projects were the restoration of the amphitheater, which Friends of Timberline funded and was completed in 2006, and restoration of the reflecting pools on the north side of the lodge, which was completed this last summer in 2021. Many people were unaware there were reflecting ponds on the north side of the lodge until this restoration was undertaken. Through a Save America's Treasures grant in the last several years, a nationally known conservator, Nina Olson, conserved all major wood art in the building. Here she is pictured at the Pioneer scene, which is in the stairwell at the lodge. Linoleum panels, and another specialist conserved works on paper. In conclusion, I just wanted to mention that I have written a history of the lodge that was published in 2009 and just reissued this last year. And also you may be interested in the beautifully illustrated book by Margaret Suppley Smith called American Ski Resort Architecture Style. Amy?
Thank you, Sarah. While we're having Amy switch over, I wanted to ask if there's a particular place we should point people for the book.
That could be available through me at my email address, which you are welcome to provide on the chat box or
sure.
However you want to do it.
I'll do
so
that.
Much for asking.
I'll share it with everyone. Okay. Amy, I think we're all set for you. I'm going to stop sharing here for Sarah, and
Thanks.
you're all set to go.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Sarah. Let me get my screen shared here real quick. All right. So my name is Amy Wally, and I am currently a cartographer at Adventure Cycling Association in Missoula, Montana. But 6 years ago, I was a graduate student in the geography program at the University of Montana, and I have been invited here today to talk about my thesis, which was titled The History and Evolution of North American Ski Resort Map Style and Design. So cartography is entwined with artistic influences, and few types of maps display this relationship as obviously as ski resort maps. Over the past 80 years, hundreds of mountain ski resorts in North America have produced thousands of maps, many of which are incredible works of art. Despite this rich history, very limited academic research existed concerning the style and design of North American ski maps. The goal of my thesis was to undertake a complete analysis of ski map style and design for the first time. The part that I will focus on in this presentation is the factors that influence design elements and techniques over time, and I'll be summarizing the progression of the most prominent ski map artists and showing a selection of their maps. The first modern ski resort map in North America was founded in 1936 in Sun Valley, Idaho by Averell Harriman. It was modeled after the ski resorts Harriman had seen on his trips to Europe and featured the world's first chairlift. It was immediately very successful, and soon after, several more ski resorts opened up across the United States and Canada. In the early years, most ski resort maps in North America were rather modest views hand-drawn by local artists. Most were either black and white, grayscale, or only used partial or limited color. Here are some examples of early ski resort maps. Notice the lack of a standard trail rating system, the extravagant north arrows, the lack of depth, and the use or lack thereof of color. By the 1960s, skiing had become a popular wintertime activity, and to keep up with the demand, ski resorts were building at a record pace. In the 10 years between 1956 and 1966, a total of 1,000 new chairlifts were constructed at an average of 50 new resorts each year. By 1966, there were 662 resorts in North America. The new resorts featured state-of-the-art technology, including faster chairlifts, snow grooming machines, and snowmaking equipment, which helped guarantee a good ski experience, but came with a cost. The resorts were priced for the middle and upper classes, and photographs of celebrities at ski resorts helped develop skiing's reputation into somewhat of a sexy sport that was worthy of the rich and famous. This increase in competition led to a demand for more elaborate maps that would impress potential customers. Hal Shelton responded to this demand and became one of the earliest artists in North America to make ski resort mapping his career. Born in California in 1916, Shelton spent his early career working as a cartographer for the US Geological Survey and is known for his innovative ideas regarding natural color maps and contour shading. By the early 1960s, Shelton was an established cartographer living in Colorado at the epicenter of the ski resort construction frenzy. Shelton's professional training in cartography, user-friendly mapping techniques, and ideal location in Colorado provided him with the perfect credentials to create impressive maps for the new resorts. Shelton hand-painted maps for several world-class resorts, including Bear Valley, Alta, and Mammoth. His paintings are characterized by a realistic color palette, thick brushstrokes for background features, and individually painted trees in the foreground. Shelton's work was well received, and he dominated the ski mapping industry in the Western United States for much of the 1960s and 70s. The inception of Hal Shelton's style of ski map can be traced back to the early 1930s in Austria, where a young man named Henrik Baron taught himself the art of painting. In 1934, Baron painted his first oblique viewed landscape called a panorama of a newly opened mountain road in Austria and won first prize in a competition for his efforts. His unanticipated success in the competition convinced him to pursue panorama painting, subsequently initiating a long and prosperous career. From 1934 to 1994, Baron painted over 500 panoramas, almost exclusively of mountainous areas. The majority of his panoramic maps illustrate majestic views of tourist locations and ski areas in his native Alps, but he also painted scenes in Asia, Africa, and North America. Baron's work is known for his use of vivid colors, glistening lakes, and whimsical cloud formations. Although Baron only painted one map of a ski resort in North America, Squaw Valley, California, his works went on to influence many American ski map artists after him. Today, Braun is widely recognized as the most accomplished panoramist of all time and as the father of the modern panorama map. Despite the fact that Braun did not actually invent the panorama, they've been around since the late 1700s, it is generally recognized that he perfected the style, especially of mountainous terrain, and his work continues to serve as the inspirational standard today. As the 1970s came to a close, Hal Shelton began to pursue other career interests in fine art. The shift in Shelton's career provided the circumstances for a new ski map artist to emerge into the business, and Bill Brown took the opportunity. Little is known about Brown's personal life, other than he also lived in Colorado. Brown monopolized the ski mapping industry for much of the late 70s and 80s, hand painting panoramas for dozens of resorts across the United States. During his career, he produced maps for at least 15 resorts in Colorado alone, and for many major resorts such as Keystone, Aspen, and Alpine Meadows. Brown's paintings evoke a familiar style seen in Hal Shelton's work, of which Brown presumably drew some inspiration. At times nearly indistinguishable, Brown's paintings are similarly characterized by a realistic color palette and individually painted trees. In addition, nearly all of Brown's paintings feature the resort at a low oblique angle, with the nearby peaks appearing sharp and prominent against a cloudless blue sky. Aspen still uses Brown's original painting to this day. Murray Hay entered into the ski map industry in the early 1980s, hand painting maps for over a dozen large resorts while living and working out of Alberta, Canada. It is difficult to describe exactly what differentiates Hay's style from his colleagues, particularly that of Shelton and Brown. Perhaps the only giveaway that you are viewing a map created by Murray Hay is the actual physical location of the resort. According to my research, Hay painted maps almost exclusively for resorts located in British Columbia and Alberta. Only 3 trail maps of his are not located in British Columbia or Alberta. In the mid-1990s, advancements in computer technology began to challenge the pervasiveness of manually created ski maps. Terra Graphics, run by Peter Powers, has produced digitally constructed ski maps for several resorts in North America since the mid-1990s. The maps are created using a raster-based computer program to achieve a look that is reminiscent of the hand-painted style. The final results are well-crafted and aesthetically pleasing, yet feel slightly inorganic compared to their hand-painted counterparts. On some maps, it is obvious that the same few trees are duplicated throughout the forest. This technique lowers production time and expense at the cost of natural variation within the vegetation. Vista Map is operated in the greater New York City area by Gary Milliken. Since 1993, Milliken has produced custom digital trail map illustrations for many major ski resorts, including Vail, Alpine, and Steamboat. Milliken's artwork is unique in that the features are entirely vector-based, except for some shading on the snow itself. The result is a clean depiction of the mountain consisting of crisp lines and vividly colored polygons. The vector style of Milliken's artwork is especially apparent in the background, where the mountains are highly stylized. Vista Map is still actively producing ski maps today. Despite the dominance of computer technology in general society over the last 2 decades, hand-painted ski maps are still commonly seen today, thanks in large part to one man, James Niehues. It's hard to overstate just how prolific Niehues currently is in the industry of ski resort mapping. Here is a list from his website of all the ski resorts he's painted, a whopping 164 resorts in North America and 17 others internationally. James Niehues learned to paint in 9th grade while living in Loma, Colorado. His early career was spent working several different jobs before he finally decided to pursue painting as a viable profession at age 40. Niehues had always admired the work of Bill Brown and decided to contact him with the prospect of overflow jobs. Coincidentally, Brown's professional interests were shifting from resort painting to video production, and in 1988, he offered Niehues his first trail mapping job of Mary Jane Mountain at Winter Park Resort in Colorado. Niehues continued to accept jobs originally meant for Brown and eventually began obtaining trail map jobs of his own. Since 1988, Niehues claims to have painted over 240 ski maps. His maps have become so inescapable that they have been taken for granted as the norm. An article written in 2014 explains, His works are so familiar that when you stumble upon a trail map that's not by him, it's almost disorienting. A friend once declared, "This trail map isn't by James Nehus, so I have no idea where I am." Nehus' success in the ski mapping business is well-deserved, crediting Baron, Shelton, Brown, and Hay as his greatest artistic influences. Nehus' panoramas pay homage to his predecessor's traditional hand-painted style while adding his own personal flair. A typical ski map by Nehus features the mountain freshly powdered with a blanket of snow, each individual tree meticulously detailed and precisely placed, and vivid colors that attract the eye and lend energy to the scene. In 1997, Nehus began tinting the sky pink with alpenglow, which has become a distinctive trait seen in many of his maps. Nehus begins the map-making process by examining aerial photographs of the resort at various altitudes and angles. He then uses an airbrush to depict the sky and snow, critical for making the mountain appear blanketed in soft powder. The rest of the image is completed using a paintbrush in gouache, an opaque watercolor, which makes future changes to the trails easier. He's semi-retired in 2014, but continues to draw and paint landscapes today. Since Nehus' retirement, it is uncertain who, if anyone, will continue the hand-painted ski map tradition. With advancements in technology and to an extent climate change, it's possible that the days of elaborate hand-painted ski maps of massive ski resorts are coming to an end. If you're interested in this topic and would like to read my full thesis, you can find it here. Again, my name is Amy Wally, but my last name was Lippis in 2015 when my thesis was published. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer anyone's questions during the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Amy. And I did paste into the chat box a link to our annual auction item, which was offered generously by Mr. James Nehus. You'll find a copy of his book on our website at the auction page at californiapreservation.org/bid. So I hate to create a bidding war here, but that's kind of our purpose at CPF, to raise money at the end of the year. So feel free to bid your friends out on this item. I think it's currently going for $120 or so. And I'm going to, Amy, I'm going to paste a link to your thesis in the chat box here in a moment so people can click on that link. So thank you very much for that presentation. We'll get back to you with questions later. So now we're going to turn it over to Mr. Werner Weiss, who will talk about a ski resort that is unbuilt by Walt Disney. So Werner, it looks like you're all sharing. I'm going to turn it right over to you.
Starting it up. Okay. Hi, my name is Werner Weiss. I've been writing about Disneyland history for over 25 years and related subjects. About 10 years ago, one of those related subjects was to write about Walt Disney's Mineral King, the resort that was supposed to be built in what's now the center of Sequoia National Park, but never was. And that's what this this presentation is going to be about. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about why Walt was interested in ski resorts and why the Mineral King really was his personal vision, not just a corporate endeavor, as maybe today's Walt Disney Company would figure out what's going to make money. In this case, it was really a vision by Walt. With that, I'll go back to my notes here. In 1931, Walt took up skiing after his doctor told him he needed to get away from his studio, get some exercise, clear his mind. So he took classes in Yosemite at Badger Pass with an Austrian skiing champion, Hannes Schroll, and they hit it off. And then when Schroll was going to build his own ski resort, in the late 30s, he needed investors. He asked Walt. Walt jumped at the chance, wrote a check for $2,500, and became one of the first shareholders in what is Sugarloaf. So, to honor Walt's support, Hannes Schroll changed the name of Hemlock Peak to Mount Disney. And as this ski map shows, the third peak over from the left is still called Mount Disney today. And the chairlift that goes up to Mount Disney was the first chairlift installed in the state of California. Let's jump forward now to 1958, when Walt went to Zermatt, Switzerland, near the Matterhorn during the filming of the live action film Third Man on the Mountain. Walt loved the town and the mountain, and he wanted both for himself, specifically to bring them back to California. So he built a scaled down model of the Matterhorn as a ride at Disneyland that opened in 1959, but the mountain village was going to have to wait a bit. Another mountain activity for Walt was in 1960, he was asked to be chairman of pageantry for the 1960 Winter Olympics in Squaw Valley near Lake Tahoe. He and his team were responsible for the opening and closing ceremonies and also some entertainment in the evenings. And everything that Walt did there was a huge hit. And Walt saw that he could entertain people in outdoors in cold weather. And he also saw, though, once again, that what was up there, Lake Tahoe, really wasn't his liking, not Squaw Valley, not the other things. He could design and build a better ski resort than any of those places around Lake Tahoe. So he hired a consultant to study sites for a ski resort. They looked in Southern California because of the large population in Los Angeles, but the snow there was too unreliable. He found a perfect spot at Mineral King, or at least it seemed like a perfect spot. It was relatively close to Los Angeles, actually about the same distance from Los Angeles and San Francisco. It was surrounded on three sides by Sequoia National Park, but it was not part of the national park itself. So it was under the jurisdiction of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which actually wanted to encourage the uses of its land like skiing and other outdoor recreation activities. There was a road. The problem with the road was it was only partially paved. It was treacherous and only usable in months that were free from snow, which is pretty bad if you're building a ski resort, that you can't have snow on the road. And it went through a national park. So this road is going to come up again in this presentation. In a couple more things about Mineral King. In 1948, the Sierra Club had backed a plan for a ski resort at Mineral King, but the inadequate road killed the project. In 1958, Tulare County asked the state of California to put in an all-weather road. The county recognized that Mineral King had possibly the greatest potential for winter sports anywhere in the Sierra Nevada mountains. In 1965, the California legislature transferred the county road to the state highway system, and the Forest Service began to accept proposals for a ski resort. So here's the announcement in 1965, right around this time of year, where the US chose Disney to develop the resort. There had been 6 other developers wanting to build, but Disney came up with the best preliminary plan. They had 3 years to come up with a permanent plan that would then give them a permanent 30-year permit. And by the way, as far as the timing, just a month earlier is what Disney had announced buying over 27,000 acres of land in Florida for a big development there that was going to include a city of the future and a city of the past. So he was taking on quite a bit. And now he was also going to build a $35 million year-round resort with a real emphasis on year-round, because this wasn't just going to be a ski resort. This was going to bring in families for hiking and all sorts of other outdoor activities, and was going to be busy all year. In fact, was going to make most of its money in the summer. It would attract 2.5 million visitors annually, with 800,000 of them from out of state by 1976. That's when it was supposed to have its first full year of operation. The 30-year permit was contingent on the 25-mile highway being built, but surely it was going to be built because there was demand for ski resort, a good plan, 2,500 permanent jobs at stake, and what could go wrong? So here's a quote from Walt Disney about how he wanted to keep, in fact, I'll read it. When I first saw Mineral King 5 years ago, I thought it was one of the most beautiful spots I'd ever seen, and I want to keep it that way. Other people wanted to keep it that way too. For other people, it meant that this 7,900 foot valley surrounded by these incredible mountains should stay the way it was. The way it was relatively unchanged, almost natural, except on the valley floor. There were some cabins from the early 20th century and remnants of some mining operations in the in the 19th century, which is why it wasn't part of the national park to begin with, but was part of the national forest system. So what Walt envisioned in this valley was this beautiful alpine ski resort, an entire village that would feel like you were in a village in the Swiss Alps. Very different from what he saw at places like Lake Tahoe. So this is about 10 months later. He's at a press conference with Mineral King. Everything was on track. How am I doing with time? Speaking of on track, Edmund G. Pat Brown had announced, who was a governor at the time, had announced $3 million federal grant towards building a road, and he was going to come up with the rest of the money. Strong support from the governor, so it seemed certain the road was going to be built. And then less than 3 months later, we'll keep going here first. So early concept art showed this kind of 1960s architecture, which I find surprising. I almost imagine Walt looking at this and going, well, this isn't what I had in mind, but we need to release something to the press. So let's release it and let's fix it. It actually looks nice, but it's not the traditional alpine village that Walt had envisioned. And the whole approach was about preserving the natural beauty. So this quote refers to a 2,500 vehicle parking garage. Later, I've also heard it referred to as a 3,600 vehicle parking garage. That would be 8 to 10 stories, would be worked into the ground so it would appear to be underground, so you wouldn't see a parking structure. And everybody in the town was going to walk or take public conveyances. And again, very different than what was in California at the time. Now, just 3 months after the press conference, Walt Disney died. And with it, though, there were still 3 Walt Disney projects that were very much alive. One was building the big resort and city in Florida. Another was Cal Arts, the art school in Valencia. And the third was to follow through on Mineral King. And the people who were running the company in Walt's absence had every intention of continuing with all 3 of those. In 1969, the plan was approved by the Forest Service. This is the plan that would open the door to the 30-year permit. You notice the architecture by this time has changed to a much more traditional Swiss-looking architecture. People walking around, again, no cars. Very nice, very picturesque. I made a list of this is kind of a combination of the 1966 initial proposals and the 1969 plan. But you can see that in addition to the large hotels, there's going to be housing for employees. There was going to be all sorts of other winter activities. And then the list on the right side, some of those are more summer activities. There would be like tennis and horseback riding, and all the utilities were going to be underground in a 60,000 square foot service facility. This was going to just be really a magical place, to use an overused Disney adjective. Here's another piece of concept art from 1969. Now, I do notice a parking lot in the top center of the corner. I don't know if that's the top level of the 8 to 10 story structure, but you can see in any case, it doesn't look like a hulking structure. It looks like a relatively small lot that would be an entry then into the village. Now we get it back into the Sierra Club. The Sierra Club had been supporting Mineral King, had suggested it back in 48, had been supportive of a resort there as recently as 1965, but now they've filed a suit in federal court to stop it. And so and they were both, I'm not going to go into all the, we could do 2 hours on all these lawsuits, which I'm not going to do. But in the end, it did very much slow down the project. Disney came up with Disney, in this case, I'm talking about the company, not the man, came up with a revised plan that was going to be much smaller. The controversial road was going to be replaced with a non-polluting cog railway. There was all the facilities were going to be scaled down. It wasn't going to be this massive project that people were afraid of. It was going to cost less. And my theory is that that they had, well, I know that they had very little money left because Walt Disney World in Florida went so far over budget that they did need to, they didn't have a lot, they didn't have $35 million sitting around to develop a ski resort. Found some more concept art. This is from the Walt Disney Family Museum. This shows a third architectural style, and I'm not sure if this is the scaled down plan or not. It certainly, again, looks nice, but in some ways it looks, less themed, less like you're in an alpine resort. And more concept art here. This is a building not quite in the village, and I wonder if this is a place that people would ski to and hike to and be served food and drinks. Again, nice artwork. Now let's talk about why Mineral King ultimately failed. There were the lawsuits. There was the fact that you had two different government agencies with different ideas of how land should be used. And most importantly, there was that road going right through the, on the left side. You can see the line that kind of goes on the side of the hill is that treacherous road. It's still there today. People still use it to go hiking in the summer. But obviously it was never turned into the highway that was envisioned for Mineral King. In the early 70s, they started working on a separate site. This is they still wanted to do a ski resort. After all, that was Walt's vision. They still wanted it to be this lovely alpine village, but now it was going to be north of Lake Tahoe at Independence Lake. And this is the 1975 concept, and I found pictures in the annual report of the 1977 concept. Again, it looks real nice. Big advantage is that it's on a lake, which is even nicer for summer recreation. Even bigger advantages are that the Sierra Club blessed it, that it was all on private land. It didn't involve the Park Service or the Forest Service. And there was going to be nothing that could stop it except the state of California. And after years of red tape, they finally threw in the towel on this one too. In 1978, Congress moved Mineral King to the Park Service. So that peninsula that you saw going into Sequoia National Park is no longer a peninsula. It's now all contiguous, all part of the park. The legislation even said that there could be no ski facilities at all built in Mineral King, completely killing any future Mineral King plans. And with that, I have some photo credits and art credits that I will not dwell on. And I'm going to go to my final slide, which is, I mentioned at the beginning that I write about Disneyland history. If you would like to see articles about all the favorite rides, primarily ones that aren't there anymore, as well as attractions in Florida that aren't there anymore, this is the website, and I publish every Friday, early wee hours of the morning. And you can also get links on Yesterland if you want to see new ones. And with that, I will turn it back over.
Thank you, Werner. We're going to dive right into the questions. Before we get going, I just wanted to give a shout out to Missoula, Montana, because we have, I think it's a fan group for Amy, who's joining us from YouTube, and they're all congratulating you, Amy, on your performance today. So
Well, thank you.
They may have some questions. I'll keep an eye on YouTube here to see if they have any questions for you. But I wanted to turn it right into the first question that I have here. There were a few that came into the chat box. And I think I'll start with a question for Amy. Jennifer is asking you, for the older hand-painted maps still in use, are these base maps onto which new trails can be marked over time as they are republished and the resorts change?
Yes. So the way it works is that the artist will paint the base mountain, and then they'll pass it over to the resort, and then the resort will overlay the trails, the names, all the text is usually always overlaid by the resort itself. And if there's any changes, if the artist is still painting and still alive, I guess they'll contact the artist, and if they want to make any changes, they'll ask them, and the artist will usually be able to kind of tweak some things. Or they'll hire someone new to take it into Photoshop and Photoshop some things. If the mountain adds new terrain, like sometimes the mountain will add a new backside or a new terrain park or something like that. Sometimes they'll put like an inset map on top of the map itself and have the artist paint in there, or hire someone to do something like that. So they are somewhat able to be manipulated after the original map is painted, but sometimes they don't have to, and they can be used for many, many years, over and over and over.
Great. Thank Sarah. I mean, Amy, that was so interesting. I never thought about the ski maps as being their own kind of a genre. Sarah, I had a question for you. You went through this about I saw it real tiny on one of your slides, the Eleanor Roosevelt room, and then you talked about the workers who made the textiles, and you said something about the women who were doing that. Could you just review that again? Because it kind of went by sort of fast and I missed some of it. You said something about like their age. Is that what you were talking about, of the women who worked on the textiles?
Yes, I was saying that they worked for their average age was 56, but they were working under one of the WPA programs, the Women's and Professional Project. And it was a WPA rule that in any family that only one person could be employed under the WPA. So these women were mostly widowed or divorced or in some way single.
That's basically my age, and some of the other descriptions fit me too. So I could have worked for the WPA. I just thought that was so interesting that they visited and they didn't even stay overnight. I wanted it to be all romantic and the president stayed there. I guess they're just too busy. And I have some questions too about the movies, but I think I'm going to hand it to John. You go first.
Oh, I actually have a movie question, which is directed to Werner, and maybe you do as well, Chris. But this one is about Walt Disney and his interest in alpine environments. I'm not sure if you went over it in the beginning because I was sort of multitasking there, but my understanding is that he was inspired during the filming of a Walt Disney production to create the Matterhorn. And I'm wondering if that long interest in alpine environments sort of stemmed from that one visit by Walt Disney, and why you think he was just fascinated with this type of environment.
Well, he enjoyed skiing himself. And in fact, one of the early Goofy cartoons in the early 1940s shows Goofy skiing at Sugarloaf, and you can actually see the Sugarloaf sign in the background. After all, Walt was a shareholder. But yeah, I do think that Third Man in the Mountain was what influenced the Matterhorn. One story I've heard, I don't know how true it is, that he sent a postcard back to his team in California of the Matterhorn and said, "Build this, signed Walt." And they figured out, and it was probably not quite that terse, but and so they went and got pictures of the from National Geographic of what the Matterhorn looked like, and designed their own 147 foot version of a mountain that was 14,700 feet in reality. So so I think that was a big part of it. But he had always had this interest in cities too. There's a whole wonderful book called Walt and the Promise of Progress City. Walt wanted Epcot to be a city, not a theme park. And so the idea of a ski village and any of these other physical environments that would be without cars was right up his alley.
Werner, I have a question since we're talking about the Matterhorn. There was a basketball court inside the Matterhorn. Is that right?
There's a basketball hoop that employees who worked in there could use as a break room recreation. And I don't think it's there anymore. As they remodeled it, they needed that space for something else. But
yeah, I read about that. And for anybody on the webinar right now, if you were at Disneyland in the old days, you can take those little buckets and you'd go on the little ride and you'd go through the Matterhorn. When were those buckets retired? Wouldn't even know what those were called, that ride.
That was in the mid-90s. It was the Skyway to Fantasyland and the Skyway to Tomorrowland, and went right through the middle of the Matterhorn, because the Matterhorn, one of the purposes of the Matterhorn was to cover up this unsightly tower that held up, in Walt's mind, that held up the buckets, because he had this big ugly tower that for the cables.
Oh, the buckets were fun, but probably a good idea they retired. So,
yeah, believe it or not, Chris, I'm old enough to remember riding.
You remember the buckets?
Yeah, so I'm not that young.
Stuff.
But I think Chris had a question about The Shining. I don't know if you're going to ask it now or
later.
You
know I did. Okay, so anybody who knows me outside of CPF knows that I am I partake in many horror movies repeatedly and often. So Sarah, of course, we aren't going to let you go without asking about The Shining. We've had a couple of questions. For one, like what parts of the building were used in The Shining? There's not a maze there. I'm sure a lot of people ask you, is the maze up there? But just for one, was any of the road up, when so for people who aren't familiar with The Shining, it's a movie from 1980, I believe, directed by Stanley Kubrick, based on a novel written by Stephen King in 1979. See, I pay attention to these things. Anyway, so in the beginning of that movie, there's like a helicopter shot going up to the lodge. Is that the actual road used that's in The Shining?
I'll have to go back and look at that. I'm not sure. I know they only used the exterior of the lodge for the movie itself, and that I think that I want to say Estes Park, and again, I haven't checked this out, in Colorado may have been used for the interior. I hope I'm not wrong on that.
No,
but
they did use part of it for the interior, yes.
I'll have to visit that as well. But I will go back and look at the road. I don't know how much of the road might have been used, and as of course there is no maze outside of the lodge, such as was seen in the movie. It's an alpine environment, so it's pretty sparse in terms of what's actually growing there. You saw that in the reflecting pond image, the kind of scrubby trees and
yeah, and for anyone who's interested in this history of this hotel in terms of movie, there is a lot of information about how in the movie they used the outside of the Timberline, but the actual story was inspired by Stephen King's stay at the Estes Park one. And then there's some other, the red room in the bathroom of anyway, I could go on, is inspired by a building in Arizona. There's a lot of cool architectural history associated with this particular story. But I have one that's maybe more formal in architecture. Why was the orientation of the Timberline Lodge rotated to face downhill when ultimately that made the snow pile up at the front door?
Actually, the reverse. It was rotated to face downhill to avoid having the snow accumulate in what would have been a V going toward the mountain. And it was because Gilbert Stanley Underwood hadn't come to see the mountain, so he didn't realize that the snowfall and drift was going to be coming downhill. So they did turn it around to face south, which actually, and changing the shape to a hexagon, opened up the wings so they had much better views. It's just that naturally through the snow, the way that the lodge was designed, it didn't protect the entry from snow accumulation anyway. And there are pictures of people skiing off of the roof when the snow accumulated. So they made a better choice by turning it around. And they did. Also locally, I might add that even though I described the architecture as rustic, here in Oregon, it is known as Cascadian, which is kind of and again, somewhat in the same vein as the Disney hopes, that desire to reproduce a European alpine ski village was definitely here. And they employed ski instructors from Switzerland. Pepe Gobble was one of the early instructors. And anyway, there was still that idea of a European chateau that I think is basic to the notion of ski resorts in America.
Thank you for making that distinction, Sarah. As an Oregonian myself, I really appreciate the fact that there's now a regional style attached specifically to Oregon. But I also wanted to ask you, because I had the same curiosity, but Eric is asking, do you have any tips on the best rates or times to stay at the Timberline?
At Timberline, the off season, the fall is a beautiful time to be there. September, October, and also the late spring, April, May are good times. Otherwise, the lodge normally, not during COVID, has been very heavily visited. They have about 2 million visitors per year. So it is hard to find those cheaper rates. There are these chalet rooms on the ground floor that share bathrooms. They don't actually share them at the room, but there's a bathroom down the hall, and those are a little less expensive as well. I might say that when the lodge was built with using public works project, one of the concerns was expressed in the newspaper of having a ski resort funded by a public works project. But of course, it's an icon now that everyone loves. And they did try to appeal to less to the what we might call the skiers who didn't have a lot of money. They did try to appeal to that population with these bunk rooms in the lower lobby. I mean, off of the lower lobby.
Great, thank you so much. It looks like we lost Chris, so I get the I have the honor of closing us out today. I just wanted to thank our three speakers today. They were all fascinating presentations. And I also pasted into the chat box a link to our auction item that's specifically related to today's program, the book by James Hughes. So you'll see that on our website at californiapreservation.org/bid. I'm going to paste a link right now into the chat box to go to californiapreservation.org/e to let us know how we did today. And again, a round of applause to our audience today and a shout out to Missoula, Montana. Please come back and join us for future programming. We'd love to have you. So I'm going to close this out today. Chris, did you have anything else?
I left and I came right back. Anyway, thank you very much, everyone, for sharing all of your expertise with us. That was so enjoyable, and I learned a lot. And everything that John said, I double on that. So, but we will see everybody soon. And make your gingerbread houses. I want to see what they look like. I'm so excited.